Good morning and welcome to Blag the Universe, the survival show for everyday life. I'm Sam Wigginton and with me is my good friend and co-author, Paul Foster.
Good morning, Sam. Good morning, everyone.
Just realised calling you my co-author is like, it's a remnant of a bygone age.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
It doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah, we need to sort of progress it. Yeah, we need a new conceit.
And my co... Paul Foster.
We'll throw something in there. We'll brainstorm.
Post-production.
It feels good to be back in the swing of things. 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, I can't believe it. This is unheard of since actually the last time we were this good at churning out podcasts, I wasn't actually even doing them anymore.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's obviously the key to getting this right is excluding you.
I'm slightly hurt, but the truth always hurts. So.
How did you find this week's topic? I thought last week we did pretty well, actually. I felt that we sort of encompassed all of the information. It kind of went out in a nice little pellet. A few people gave me feedback. They said it was rather informative. Did the trick.
Yeah, and that, they actually expressed some sort of like eagerness to listen to it, which was frankly unheard of before that point. So I think we probably just picked the right topic more than anything else.
Yeah, maybe.
And so this week's topic is the birth of Hollywood, which This
is the opposite.
Yeah.
It's really like difficult to get your head around it.
That really bad sophomore album that everyone has, and it's like slightly disappointing. Actually, I have had one person was like, "Oh yeah, that sounds really good," and the other person just said, interesting.
It is quite interesting.
This is for you, Josh.
Yeah, go on, Josh. It's actually I've been forgetting to thank people who have been giving us our subjects, but this was Eloise.
Ah, that's right.
Friend of the show, Eloise Foster.
Slightly Eloise. More than friend of the show.
yeah, that's it.
In an official capacity.
Got a bit of paper to prove it. Yeah, so I thought it was quite good. I don't really care too much about the machine that Hollywood has become these days, but I thought it was there were some interesting little things that came out of it.
For sure.
Yeah. So should we get stuck in?
Yeah. No hanging about.
Yeah.
What are the name of the game? Will you please take the things that I was thinking about and put it into a coherent sentence, Paul?
I think what you're trying to say is, how does this work? So basically, I always feel bad that we do this every time, but there are always people who go, sorry, what? I don't get it. Even when guests come on, they're like, sorry, what is it again? So basically, we go away. We've had a couple of days to look at this topic, the birth of Hollywood. And then we turn up today without our notes. We've had to cram beforehand. I was up quite late last night trying to get a definitive answer on certain things because there's a lot of misinformation on the internet. You'll be surprised to know. So we've got to wade through all the crap. We're not allowed to use Wikipedia.
None of this misinformation is due to us, of course.
No, that's it. Well, I know no one really cares. I know no one really is that bothered, but I don't want to give people the wrong date if I can help it. So so we go away. We have a few days, then we come together and we see what we can remember. And if Sam comes up with something that I was like, oh yeah, I'd forgotten that, or I didn't know that, then I give him a little bell, which is a point, and he'll do the same for me, hopefully. And then we'll see. We'll see who wins at the end. So hopefully one of us will run away with this one because we've had a couple of draws.
Yeah. Oh, don't worry, you certainly will run away with this.
I wouldn't be so sure.
This is going to be one of those ones where I go, so this thing happened. I think it was like this, but I don't know who did it all and when it was.
Well, originally we set a cut-off date. We said, we'll do the first Academy Awards, which was 1929. We thought we'll have that as a cut-off. I didn't get that far at all. I think I stopped sort of 1920s as a block, just had a couple of facts about that.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what you came up with.
My sources dried up at around the convenient sources dried up at the 20s. I've got some stuff in the Academy Awards.
Oh, okay.
All interesting stuff.
Yeah, good.
So, Paul, take us away with the birth of Hollywood.
Well, we've got two founding fathers of Hollywood. One is officially the father of Hollywood, but there was a guy before him. So, were you reading about Harvey Wilcox?
Yes.
Heard of this guy? And his wife, Dada. I assume it's Dada. It's quite a nice name, actually. Daeida. All the vowels. Harvey Wilcox noted that there was a big, like a land boom, like a market estate boom, whatever you want to call it. It was sort of all wrapped up in one. So basically, it was on the West Coast where Los Angeles is. Because my geography is terrible, so I was like, "Oh right, that's where it is."
Were you hoping for a point there?
No, I wasn't.
LA.
I just like to. Yeah, people were getting to know us quite well through the podcast, so I always feel like I have to like show my shortcomings.
Yeah.
Give an honest appraisal of myself. So on the West Coast, really nice area. It was nice weather, nice conditions, like fertile soil, good for agriculture. So this guy bought up a big, I think it was about 500 acres of land, and this was in 1887. And they didn't know what they were going to call it, but they were on a train chatting to a woman who had I can't think of the word, but she had a plot of land in Illinois, and that was called Hollywood. And Harvey and Dada liked the name so much that they decided to call their own area. So
never found that out.
All right. Well, there you go. That was one that was on a website, and I had to sort of dig to confirm it. But yeah, it appears to be true. So February the 1st, 1891, I believe it was. No, sorry, they bought it in 84, and it was named in 87, February 1st, 87. And then Wilcox died in 91. But by then they'd got quite a decent sort of size little community there. And then it was what was his name? Hobart. No, it's Hobart Johnston.
Yeah, I can't remember his name either.
Oh no,
it wasn't
Whitley.
Carver,
Whitley. H.J. Whitley. So then he bought up 498 of the 500 acres. Do you want to take over from him?
This isn't something I know too. I just know that he just built a lot of houses and made it a bit sort of middle classy. But apart from that,
yeah, basically, when Wilcox founded the place, he envisioned it. He was a Protestant and a Prohibitionist, so he envisioned it as this really teetotal era. So a lot of the articles were thinking, "I wonder what he'd make of the place now." So it's like all the excess and extremes that he would have hated in his life. So there were like bars and like nightclubs sort of in the vicinity, but not in his actual place. But then when Whitley took over, he brought electricity, he brought telephone lines, like gas. The only thing they had to wait for was water, because there were lots of oranges and lemons were grown in the area. So agriculture picked up, and then the cost of water became quite a lot. So I think he took it over in sort of the turn of the century. So start of the 1900s, and by 1910, the people of Hollywood decided that they'd become part of Los Angeles in order to get be on the waterboard, basically. And then so he founded a hotel, the Hollywood Hotel, which apparently is really famous, and that's something that kind of comes up again a bit later. And then he did a couple more bars and things like that. But he decided that the conditions were really good. And like I say, the soil was good, the weather was nice. So, but what he really needed was some sort of economic industry to be set up so that he could attract more people. So, just by chance, there was a little movement where movie companies they're originally based in New York and New Jersey. That was sort of the area that they were, and then they had found that the conditions in the West were better. So it was like better lighting because they had to use natural light. There are really nice vistas around. Do interrupt me if I'm just going off on one. But
no. There's a perfect sort of way for me to sort of carry on this story depending on when you stop.
Right, okay. Yeah. I'll try and make it sooner rather than later. So, so this Whitley bumped into a couple of Hollywood types. Sorry, they would become Hollywood types, but they were film types. So a couple of directors and a couple of producers that were sort of having a look around Hollywood to see if it was suitable. And then, managed to coax them to set up a studio. And then gradually, just more and more people rolled in. Apparently, he was a very persuasive personality. One of those you could chat to him for 5 minutes, and it kind of felt like you'd known him your whole life. It was. He seems like quite a nice guy. Normally, you kind of imagine these big like land magnates being pretty horrible, like someone off of Dallas or something like that. The program I'm talking of, not the area itself. Don't want to offend anyone. But
we have quite a large listenership in Dallas.
That's it. The demographic. That's our demographic.
You should see our stats. They are astounding.
So, right, I'd better shut up. Do you want to step in there? Give you
two. Yeah, I'll step in quite happily. So, as you alluded to, the centre of the American film industry was New York or New Jersey. So, New York first. Second was Chicago. Specifically, it was the other side of the Hudson River at Fort Lee. Because you were saying how these directors came to Southern California and saw all great terrain and stuff. That's why they were there for similar reasons. You know, you've got these ravines and cliffs and stuff. And so actually, I found out that's where the term cliffhanger came from. It was literally like they'd finish episodes. The early movies would have some of them would be like weekly installments. Like it's kind of the way we think of soaps, where returning characters. Oh, what are they doing this week? Because the one reel of films were only 12 minutes long, and it was always finish on some sort of climax to hook them for next week, and so often that was genuinely hanging off a cliff. But anyway, so you had a lot of. Did you look at all at the birth of cinema as a general thing?
Only as it sort of directly related to the Hollywood thing, because it was one of those that the topic just kind of like fell away from you, and I thought we should probably do another episode. Yeah.
Really interesting stuff, but like just sort of gives taster of it. It ties in. So Thomas Edison invented the phonograph, which recorded sound onto a wax tablet, something like not too far removed from a vinyl. The way we think of that, with the big horn. And his company was one of the first ones. He credits himself as being the inventor of film, but he wasn't. People in Europe had done it before him, I think, and either way, he didn't have exclusive rights to it. But he felt that he did, and so he organised basically a firm to go round and say, well, you're using his self-patented technology for recording film, so you have to pay him a certain percentage for any film that you make money on. Went around all the studios doing this, and a lot of them were too poor to pay any money off to him. Others just said, stuff it, this is my art form, get away with it. And so they upped sticks and moved west. And so that's one of the driving forces that pushed people away from Fort Lee to Southern California.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. We talked last week about Celsius, who kind of ripped off his students' like discoveries on the auroras. And it was a similar thing here. There was a guy, Dixon, who Edison was working with. And it seems that they had a falling out because basically Edison kind of wanted to take credit for Dixon's work. And so the company set up was the MPCC, which I think they're still around, aren't they?
Are you thinking of the MPPDA?
Yeah, I might be thinking of someone else.
Yeah. There were lots of acronyms that are just like going around my head right now.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, sorry, you're right. Yeah, because Edison's company was the Motion Pictures Patent Association, and that was his way of trying to clamp down on the technology. Even as you say, like even as in Europe, like you've got the Lumiere guys in France, and other people are sort of taking the technology further on. So it was definitely a US focused thing where they were just trying to clamp down. It was a monopoly, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it was a legal monopoly. They had all the money, so they hired all the lawyers, and then
all the heavies.
yeah,
Probably
that's it.
more.
That's it. And they basically they wanted to button down the industry because at the time, like you say, it was the one reel films, which were like you say, 12 to sort of 15 minutes long, and they were all shown in these Nickelodeons with a sort of cinemas. Again, these were all East, and basically they had a good thing going. So you had. Did you read about D.W. Griffith?
Yes, I've read plenty. I've got so much stuff in my mind, none of it coherent, but sort of in there.
Well, I'll pass on to you, but only to say that he was one of the people who really was taking the medium forward and wanted to see where it could go, wanted to make longer films and try different techniques. He came up with a lot of the cinematic language that is still used today. That was one thing I noticed. I was surprised at how early like the standard format was nailed down, because it was 35mm film, which obviously until relatively recently with the digital age and stuff was still being used, and 24 frames a second, which again is the sort of industry standard.
Didn't realise that. I'll give you a point. I mean, what I do know about that is that they had to hand crank the camera, and like so if you imagine. You have a cameraman who's got to steadily do it, because if he speeds up, then the action speeds up. It's only get too many frames, and same problem if he slows down. But because of course these were silent films, the first ones created by Hollywood. D.H. Griffith, was it?
D.W. I believe.
D.W. Griffith. Yeah.
Griffith.
D.W. Griffith could sit there and coach his actors through the performance, because so he could say so camera action, and then they'd start and it says, oh, you're feeling faint, and the person would go, oh, but you remember a bygone time, a happier time, and they go, oh, like, because it's not something you really think about, is it, that that there are certain benefits that not having sound afforded. You could film in places where you didn't have to worry about loud sounds in the city. You could...
Yeah, although they still do that these days, don't they? If you ever watch like a making of, you always hear the director shouting, because obviously the way everyone's mic'd up is just, you have to be right near
purely
it.
Directional, yeah.
So you still do get a lot of that they'll say, especially someone like George Lucas, where nothing is actually on set. Just stand in front of a big screen. It's like, there's a robot eating your face. Not that that's ever happened in Star Wars.
How do I act that? What does that look like? Well, what I remember about D.W. Griffith. Sorry, you were saying about early ways of doing things. So in terms of the actual style of acting, naturalism is something that didn't come straight away, because a lot of the early actors, some, not all, were people who moved across from the stage acting, and so you had essentially 19th century techniques. And so there's this brilliant, I think it was an Arthur Zucker film. So Zucker ended up buying Paramount a little bit later, and it was his first film. He was aiming at a middle-class audience, saying, if we make these more expensive, if we, get bigger names and do everything with more quality, the American market will buy it up for more money. And so there's this brilliant clip of a French actress, Sophia, I can't remember, but like a big name in France, and she goes into this room and sees a body that's recently deceased, could be her father, lying on a slab. And the program I was watching said, see if you can spot the moment where she sees the dead body, and she walks in and goes, sort of just shocked and all, like completely over dramatized, because that was how at least European, a lot of these people were people who came across from Europe. And I guess that's probably why they started working as actors in New York first, because that's the first port of call if you came over on the boat.
Yeah, certainly at that time.
Um, but so that was sort of leaping 5 years into the future. I'm trying to grasp what was the next step along with D.W. Griffith, because I know sort of around 1915 he did his first feature length, which was A Birth of a Nation. Did you read anything about that?
Yeah, I did a little bit. Again, it was one of those rabbit
most racist
holes.
film of all time.
Well, yeah, supposedly. Although a lot of people, I'd be interested to see it because a lot of people, it was meant to be an anti-war film, and yeah, it's kind of seen as this
told
propaganda.
From the southern perspective. That's the thing.
Yeah, but apparently, like people, there were a lot of critics that I read who actually said that it's a shame he's been tarred with the racist brush, because it isn't actually the case. They say there's actually not that much to it. But I mean, there were a couple of awards that were named after him that have since been taken away, and they've been renamed because of the association with him. Because basically there was some controversy over whether it was glorifying the Ku Klux Klan, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, I've seen a few clips of it, and basically you have scenes of the Ku Klux Klan, who are the heroes in the film, riding with Wagner's Flight of the Valkyries playing over the top, and it's very rousing, if not slightly disturbing. And the context of this is that the Ku Klux Klan was pretty much dormant at this point, and reformed and grew in numbers drastically following the release of the film.
Whether that's what he wanted, though, is
it was based on a book called The Klansman. There was this. I saw an interview with an African American gentleman who was saying that like people of his community were just like crying in the auditorium, but actually like talking of things that were groundbreaking about this film. This was huge. It took in $3.5 million, which was the biggest ever at that point. You had 35-piece orchestras were in the auditorium as well, playing along to it live, and so that just doesn't quite sort of fit in my mind.
It's mad,
sitting there in the movie house on Dublin Road with a 35-piece orchestra. No, I just can't see it.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because like you were saying earlier, that people moved west in order to try and escape the monopoly that Edison had with his D.W. Griffiths actually worked for Biograph, who were one of the film companies, and then he left them in 1913 because he was basically making films on the sly beforehand. But basically, there was a little independent band of film companies who kind of grouped together, and that was when then the Nickelodeon places became proper movie theatres, and that I think the independent guys came up with like intertitles for dialogue, so like where it cuts to
screen, a card screen thing,
which again like feeds into sort of the melodrama. Because when it's sort of like parodied, it's always like woe is me sort of things, and then it's sort of woe is me. So they came up with that. They came up with film crediting because they realised that people actually wanted to know who was starring in the films. So that came out of that. So it's quite nice that this sort of independent mindset actually produced some of these sort of modern day things that we just take for granted.
It was Mary Pickford who was really instrumental in getting actors' and producers' names. No, sorry, the actors' names, and not just the directors and producers onto the actually accredited. She was one like the first sort of female powerhouse of Hollywood,
Hmm.
right at the beginning. So I think her first year in Hollywood was 1910 or 1911, and she made 43 films that year. If you
It's incredible, isn't it?
and she was a very astute businesswoman and realized that she can make sure that she gets more money out of this. And there's a photograph I saw that 1910. No, literally nobody had heard of her. They just called her the Biograph Girl
Right.
because they just knew that she was in all the Biograph films. And then a couple of years later, there's her standing in the street in New York on this plinth, surrounded by huge crowds, using just like an old metal megaphone just to amplify her voice. And she was the one that really made people. It's because of her that the idea of stars of Hollywood, or like the fact that anybody knows their names at all, because she changed the way it was thought of.
I'll give you another one for that. Yeah, I mean, when the boom happened, it just kind of exploded over a short space of time. The first, it's worth just trying to fit a couple of facts in here now, because we've been sort of talking generally. So the first film shot in California, in Hollywood itself, actually, was in Old California. It was called. And that was D.W. Griffiths. That was the first one he made.
What date?
That was 1910.
See, I've got an earlier one than that.
Was it? What was the name of the film?
The Count of Monte Cristo, 1908.
Yeah, that was.
And I know it was half of it was in. It said half, and I didn't know what that meant.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that was the Selig Film Company, and they were based in Los Angeles. So it's not properly Hollywood.
Okay, and it was shot in.
They shot some of it on the top
Chicago,
of a building in Hollywood, and then other bits were shot. Yeah. So I think it was the first one that was bits of it were filmed in.
But it wasn't the full one. Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't the first Hollywood film. And the first Hollywood production company was the Nestor Film Company. I think it was the Nestor. Yeah, Nestor. So they took over a tavern that was around in Wilcox time, the founding father of the Hollywood era, which was the Blondo Tavern. And that had been like empty for a little while, and it was Whitley himself who convinced them to set up shop there, and that was William and David Horsley and Al Christie, who again these names that come up. I couldn't actually find out that much about them really, but they were quite famous. So again, they were a company that started as the Centaur Film Company in New Jersey, and they'd been convinced to come across. And then apparently by 1912, there were 15 film companies in Hollywood. So it is incredible.
I can't remember what the stats were that I read, but it's something like that. And relatively, by the mid 1910s, you already have the big five, the little three, and so the big five being right. Let's go. Universal. Actually, were Universal one of them?
No, yes. not in Hollywood. They had been formed in New York, but they hadn't come across yet.
What, even in 1915?
Even by 1915, I believe.
Really? Okay, so
they were quite late, I think.
Let's see. You did have RKO. You had Paramount. I was in the shower this morning, going, "What are the five again?" Easy. Forget it.
I'll give you a point for having a go because I didn't get any of that.
You had, but basically, what I found interesting was it was all the ones that we know of. So United Artists were one of the little three, along with Columbia. And
I heard that they came across in sort of the early 1920s. I think you might be 10 years out.
Okay.
Because Columbia was 23, and then you had MGM. Sorry, no, MGM and Columbia were 24.
Well, the thing with
23.
The thing with a lot of these, where they were, so you would have all the people. Well, you'd have people working there. So Paramount, for example, was something before it, which was something before it.
Yeah,
it just kind of changed over time.
Yeah.
And so you had the constituent bits. But maybe, did you read anything about Max Sennett? He's somebody I looked at quite a lot.
He sounds like a superhero.
He should have been. He was a superhero of his time. So if I said Keystone Cops and Charlie Chaplin and Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, this was his studio. He was the first sort of out and out comedy studio.
Oh, was that about 1917? I was reading something about Charlie Chaplin around that
time. To be honest, I can't remember the date. But he was very influenced by the French Pathé film. All you have to do is compare a French Pathé comedy of a policeman running through the streets to his Keystone Cops, and it's exactly the same gag.
Right, okay. We'll have to put some of these in the show notes, some of these clips.
Yeah, for sure. And so it was with him that, Charlie Chaplin made his name. And one of the big turning points was that, Charlie Chaplin came over, was an immigrant from London, having been on the music halls at a very early age, was picked up by Mack Sennett's company while he was doing tours of America, and was, if you compare his debut with Mack Sennett's own debut, I saw a clip of Mack Sennett trying his hands, and to put him. To describe him as a mediocre actor, just about does it.
Even when they didn't have to talk, or
pretty awful.
Yeah.
Whereas Charlie Chaplin was a hit straight away, and in one of his films, he felt that his gags weren't given enough time, and so it was like he would fall over and fall on his back, and his feet would get caught on the windowsill.
Mm-hmm.
And like we'd see is he'd fall over, his feet catch, and then it cuts away immediately to a different scene. Whereas when he does the same gag later on when he's directing it himself, because he said, either I'm going or you're going to give me the rights to direct my own films.
Right.
He then has these really long lingering shots of all of his jokes and just gives them the time to breathe.
I like
that. But all of those sort of what we now think is relatively trite comedic handles, throwing the custard pie, the all of those sort of really falling over things, and these were all Mack Sennett things.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to remember the big one. There was one that was
it's not
really
like
obvious.
slipping on a banana skin or something like that, is it?
No, I can't remember, but it's that kind of thing,
Yeah.
the thing that we all recognise. But the thing, he actually didn't throw that many custard pies, even though people say that about him, apparently. Actually, it's bricks, because they were...
Right.
Because if you think about it, throwing a custard pie only makes sense if you're in a pastry shop.
Right, yeah.
Whereas throwing a bricks are everywhere. And so there's this scene of Charlie Chaplin and these two people just hurling bricks at each other, and one smacks him square in the face. They must have been rubber or something. Sorry, I've been going on.
No. That's payback for me going off on one earlier. Talking of Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, I can't remember the other one because I didn't recognise a lot.
Oh, Harold Lloyd.
Might have been him, or Douglas Fairbanks. Is Douglas Fairbanks a person?
Douglas Fairbanks was, I think he was married to Mary Pickard.
Oh, right.
Pickard. Who's the lady? I'm not 100% sure. It was either Fairbanks or somebody else.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, it was just one of these names
kind of merged.
I'm
not sure whether I should get a point for that.
It's all right. I'm giving you one anyway. It's fine. Just see it as charity if it's not correct.
Oh, that's very good.
So they all used to stay in Whitley's Hollywood Hotel. So that's where this became quite famous. It's basically a lot of production studios would basically live there for long, extended periods of time. And a lot of these big actors and actresses would stay there. So much so that in the dining room, they had stars on the ceiling with their names in. so that they could, so that people when they were visiting the hotel could tell like who sat where. And in fact, then when the hotel had to be, I don't know if it was demolished or if it burnt down, something like that. It was unclear, but that was about 1956. And they liked the stars idea so much that's when the Walk of Fame got made. When that all sort of collapsed, so that was quite cool.
Very good.
And then
I didn't realise that.
It just sort of reinforced, because everyone was in close proximity, it sort of reinforced everyone got to know each other, and then sort of the industry became quite incestuous, and then obviously and that drew more people in because you sort of bring your mates in and stuff like that. And then because, like you say, people like Mary Pickford, everyone wanted to see her, so you'd get lots of people would start coming over. You had a lot of the top talent from Europe, like Greta Garbo, and I can't remember the other name, Marlene Dietrich. That's it. So they came over to get involved. You'd have people come over to say, I want to be an extra, I want to be a camera operator, I want to lug the gear around for you, be a set dresser, props. Loads of people just flock over to find work, and then basically there was this massive snowball that sort of set off from there. I've got the other thing we didn't mention: the first feature film. And it was also the first. Sorry, it wasn't the first feature film in the world, but the first feature film in Hollywood, was The Squaw Man in 1914, and that was some epic western, and that was a 6-reel. It was almost sort of 90 minutes.
By Cecil B. DeMille. That's
it. Yeah,
I am astounded that I remember his name.
But again, he's one of those apparently sort of massive names that everyone knows. So. That was quite interesting. The Hollywood sign, that was put up in 23 as a advertisement for housing.
Real estate,
there. And it used to read Hollywood Land. You probably already knew that. Sorry?
Our good listeners didn't.
Hopefully not. And then in 1949, the sign, basically the advertising period sort of was over, and the sign was left up there, and it got quite weather damaged. So apparently the Hollywood sign has been replaced a few times over the sort of 100 years or so since then. But and then the land got taken down because it was part of, I can't remember then, but somehow like it was their equivalent of the council got involved and said, oh well, we don't need the land, it's just this place is known as Hollywood.
Give it over as a gift.
Yeah, that was quite cool.
Okay.
The clapperboard was invented in Hollywood, I believe, because that was a way of synchronizing the video and the sound. So if they did that, they could see it on the screen and also hear it on the recording. So I believe that was I think it was one of Charlie Chaplin's studios that he was with, I think, developed that.
Well, United Artists he was with.
Right, okay.
It was the one
I think it was with a smaller...
They were quite a small one at the time.
But then I guess United Artists would have been like a combination of
It was
studios.
Pickford, I think Fairbanks and Chaplin all came together.
That's good. I'll give you that. Flipping out, you're running away with it today. But yeah, so there were a couple of other facts then that I've just remembered. In 1910, there were 5,000 people in Hollywood, in the area, not in the film industry. By 1920, that had gone up to 35,000 people.
Oh wow!
So that gives you some idea of the boom,
expansion.
Yeah. No, that's it.
I think those are the big hitters.
Yeah.
I most of the things that are in my head now are just like funny stories I read and heard about.
Yeah. I think this is one of the first topics that I think we could actually do a sequel episode to at some point in the future, because I'd love to. This is just before the peak of the Hollywood's golden age, which was that was the 30s. Yeah, that would be great.
The 20s almost like ruined. The 20s Hollywood almost ruined it for itself because a period of real decadence and number of scandals with Arbuckle. He fell from grace after he was accused of I think it was like rape and murder of it was either like a stagehand or a fellow actress.
Wow.
It was a relatively young girl, and basically there were a load of scandals and people pushing the boundaries more of cinema, and a lot of people called for censorship.
Although that again is into the 30s when that all started.
Well, the MPPDA, was that 30s?
Yeah. That
so it was a response to the 20s. Okay, I see.
But yeah, I mean, I think again that was just because everyone was in the same area all the time. I think that's where that comes from, isn't it? You know, that there was lots of like people being accused of sleeping around and adultery and stuff like that, but just because they all knew each other, they were all enjoying fame, which was kind of this new thing. So it is a fascinating time. But generally, it seemed quite upbeat. I think it was exciting and it sounded quite promising. There wasn't too much scandal until a little bit later, I believe.
But it was very exciting.
There was one last thing I wanted to say, actually. Griffith, because I know I've got a massive deficit to try and claw back, but Griffith is credited. We talked about some of his technique, but we didn't actually mention what they were.
I forgot to ask you that.
Yeah, so like a classic one, which is still used today, is like the cutting between the pursuer and the pursued. So it's be like, see them, then you see them, then you see them, and then gradually the cuts get shorter and shorter to build tension. So that was quite a big thing. So he did a lot of that.
He said that he claimed to have invented the close-up, which was just complete nonsense.
All right.
Because that had been done in Europe already. I've remembered the thing about the Max Sennett company, the thing that they every film had, and it was like every film had to finish with a chase.
Right.
Like people pursuing Charlie Chaplin down the street, and you see some of the chases done right at the beginning, and they are properly dangerous because not just by his company, by all sorts of companies, because before then the stage actors were the lowest of the low in society, and they looked down on people who played parts in film, and so they were lower than the lowest of the low.
Wow.
They were really expendable,
or dispensable.
Thank you. Very expendable. And so you have like films of trams going along and people hanging off cables off the side of the tram with cars going past them, or people like properly crashing their cars with them in them, and it's like live filmed and looking at stuff. And it was Mary Pickford who was instrumental, in not only in getting people's names out there, but saying, by raising their stock, they became less dispensable. And you couldn't try and kill your performers off every time.
Yeah, you wanted to keep them alive because they'd make you more money
for the next film. Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's everything I have to say. Have you got anything more?
Only, again, in the interest of trying to claw back some points, but at the height some of the one reel stuff, certainly, they would be making one or two of those a week. And I believe in the 20s, they reckon there were over 800 films a year were being produced.
Wow.
It's just incredible because obviously they're only 12 minutes long, so you could fit a few in a week. And I think Griffith himself made over 400 films in his time at Biograph, which was like 5-6 years. And he did a variety. They did westerns and melodrama.
Because the reason he left was because he wanted to do feature lengths, and Biograph basically said, "It gets us more money if we charge 5 cents a go."
Biograph were part of the MPPA. So he wanted to escape that as well because he sort of saw them as stifling the
I didn't know
the art form.
I didn't know they were part of the MPPB.
I did mention that earlier. You obviously,
did they? I'll give you a retrospective point if you promise not to say anything more.
Yeah, that's it. Let's
Right.
get rid
Okay.
of this one.
That's all you're having, because if it stays like that, it means that I win by 1 point.
Oh, no, that's closer than I was expecting. Lovely. What's the damage then?
I got 15 and you got 14.
Nice. Oh, well done. Well done. I'm glad
Clawed
someone's
back
won
some
it.
valuable points.
Right. Well, thank you, Sam, for that. If you weren't already aware, we've started putting these up on YouTube now. I say we've started putting these up. We've put one up, but the idea is that we do these every time. So we're actually live streaming now. We went off on one, didn't we, a little bit there, which probably in the podcast version, if you're listening to that, we probably had to cut some of that out. So if you want the full uncut thing, if you go to our YouTube channel, you can watch the whole thing as it went out live, complete with all the fluffs. But yeah,
Fluffs?
we did. Not from your good self, obviously.
I should hope not.
But one thing to note, actually, one thing I've noticed as we're doing the admin stuff now, the Facebook group, I don't know what's happened there, but there's hardly anyone seeing our posts. So I don't know if people have left. I mean, it's fine if people aren't interested. Obviously, that's one thing. But it seems to me that there are quite a few people who used to see stuff who now aren't noticing it. So Twitter is sort of underutilized. That's partly our fault. But if you want to follow us on Twitter, we're at Blag the Universe. That's probably the best way, because then obviously you can set notifications so that you get everything if you want it. If you just want to find it when you're on Twitter, you can do it that way. So yeah, I'd encourage more of you to follow us on Twitter. We'll follow you back. So if that's still a thing that people do,
just boosts your follow. Whatever.
Yeah, just
that's what people use the Twitter for, isn't it?
But I think we're going to try and transition to use Twitter more than Facebook, because, like I say, Facebook seems a waste of time, because some of them it's like, oh yeah, 5 people have seen that. So I don't know what they're doing there. Also, get in touch for the future emails. We'll try and give our next topic ahead of time. And if you follow us on blagtheuniverse.wordpress.com, it'll go up there. We sometimes do like here's the next episode. We're going to start an official listener leaderboard. Sam's already got the points written down from the previous season, so we'll put them up and we'll have a proper thing on the webpage where you can compete. So yeah, basically, if you've got anything that you find out interesting about future topics, give us an email. We've changed the email address. It's blagtheuniverse@gmail.com. Makes it easier to remember. So yeah, I think that's everything, isn't it, Sam?
I think that is everything.
Go off on one too much.
Well done.
But for now, this long-winded feature-length production, let's draw it to a close.
A little bit over the 1 reel.
Yeah, just a touch. So yeah, I guess I'll blag you later, Sam.
I'll have to blag you later, mate.